Dear students of class 8A and 8B, already the teaching of this lesson is completed. Now I am going to re-explain the same lesson. The main points of this lesson I am going to re-explain. Teaching already is completed, but simply I am going to re-explain all the main points for your better understanding. Then afterwards I shall introduce a new lesson. Now the first point I am going to discuss about it. The points mentioned here: Lord Wellesley, Lord Dalhousie, Subsidiary Alliance, Doctrine of Lapse, Outright Wars, Conquest of Marathas, Conquest of Maratha power, Punjab, Maratha kingdoms, Punjab, and annexation of Ayodhya. So these are the points, my dear students, according to which I am going to re-explain the lesson. The first and foremost point, Lord Wellesley, Subsidiary Alliance, Doctrine of Lapse. So these are the points I am going to discuss in a very shortest form, because already teaching is completed. I have completed its teaching. As already mentioned that the Maratha leaders were disunited, and as a result of it, they could not make the best use of the policy of non-interference that the English followed after the departure of Lord Wellesley. But Peshwa Bajirao too, he just made an attempt to take the advantage, to take the opportunity. Peshwa Bajirao too, he tried to make such an opportunity to avail, but he carried on secret negotiation with Maratha leaders, and in the meantime the English offered him the proposal. English offered him some proposals. What was the proposals? English offered him some proposals of different, settlements of their financial dispute, and ultimately Bajirao too accepted the proposal as advised by the English. But the fact is, Bajirao too could not achieve success because of the subsidiary alliance. The subsidiary alliance, which was introduced by Lord Wellesley, under the terms of the subsidiary alliance, Bajirao too son Nana Sahib was not recognized by the British to the throne of his empire, and as a result of it, Nana Sahib also had to protest against the system. He decided to fight against the British only because of that reason. Nana Sahib disliked the policy of Lord Wellesley subsidiary alliance. Under the terms of the subsidiary alliance, many Indian states came under their control, and Nana Sahib from the very beginning was against the terms of the subsidiary alliance. That's why Nana Sahib, protested against it. And another thing is that Punjab, how did the British acquire the Punjab? The Treaty of Amritsar. The Treaty of Amritsar prevented Ranjit Singh from realizing his dream of making, a Sikh state, establishing supremacy on the north and south of Satluj River. But Ranjit Singh avoided misunderstanding with the British. But ultimately, Ranjit Singh signed a treaty, the Treaty of Amritsar. Under the terms of the Treaty of Amritsar, there was a negotiation between Ranjit Singh and the British, that British would not interfere in the internal politics of the Sikhs. But after the death of Ranjit Singh, the British broke the terms of the treaty, and the British, decided to interfere the internal politics of the Sikhs in order to weaken them. Meanwhile, Lord Wellesley, introduced the policy of subsidiary alliance in order to expand British territories in India, because his policy of expansion brought much honor to the British government. He defeated the Marathas and weakened them considerably. How? By taking the weakness of the Marathas. Already declared before that, the British declared war against the Marathas, but the Marathas' position was weakened, and hence their final collapse was just a question of time. The British defeated Tipu Sultan. The British, afterwards they established their supremacy, political superiority in India. But Lord Wellesley, Lord Wellesley, meanwhile, decided to save money of the British and declared for the rest of the states of India a policy to acquire them. That means the British, Lord Wellesley's main aim was to acquire, occupy other Indian states without spending money, without declaring war. That's why he introduced a policy. The name of the policy is Subsidiary Alliance. According to the terms of the Subsidiary Alliance, it was decided that the British would capture some Indian states where the rulers had no legal heir to their throne. That means the leader would not have any right to adopt any male child as the heir to the throne. If the leader, suppose the ruler had no male child to the throne, in that case the ruler would have no right to adopt any male child as the heir to the throne. So despite Lord Wellesley's brilliant effort and far-reaching success, the Court of Directors of England, they could not overlook the grievances of the people of India. Almost all people of India, including almost all the rulers of India, including the people of India, they grew offended against the system of Lord Wellesley's Subsidiary Alliance, because the terms of the Subsidiary Alliance was very much insulting. So many Indian states had gone under the hands of the Britishers. That's why ultimately Lord Wellesley had to resign. Wellesley's policy is subject to severe criticism in England, and from the nationalist point of view, they thoroughly criticize Lord Wellesley's Subsidiary Alliance. So temporarily, Lord Hastings was sent as the new Governor General of India in order to satisfy the needs and expectations of the Indian rulers and the people of India. So on reaching India, Lord Hastings declared the outright wars. He declared outright wars. What is outright wars? Outright wars was a direct policy of declaring war against the enemies or against the opponents, and by defeating them, acquiring their territories, so that no one could blame that the British occupied the territory by means of misguiding policy, by means of adopting any misguiding policy, or the British misguided the Indian rulers and captured their territories or their states. That's why the policy of outright wars adopted by Lord Hastings, and he declared war. That means come and fight us, come and defeat us. If you have any skill, any strategy, any bravery, come and declare war on us and defeat us. And if you have no ability, then we are ready to defeat you, and then acquire your property and then occupied your territories, so that no one can criticize us. That's why the policy of outright wars he adopted, and once again the policy of declaring wars against the Indian states, the British started following, and ultimately But the policy, whatever once Lord Wellesley adopted the policy of subsidiary alliance towards the native states to bring them under the British rule. At the same time, Lord Wellesley, after the end of the rule of Lord Hastings, Lord Wallace Dalhousie came to India as the new Governor General of India. He also followed a policy of expansionist policy, the policy of doctrine of lapse. And why did he adopt that policy? He adopted the policy in order to bring Indian states under the British rule, and applied that doctrine of policy for the annexation of Indian states. And he annexed so many Indian states one by one. The doctrine of lapse implied that on the failure of natural heirs, the sovereignty of dependent states, those who are dependent, those which were dependent states, their property should be vested on the British government. Their property should be vested on British government. Under the terms of subsidiary, what was the terms of the subsidiary alliance? The terms of the subsidiary alliance was the British should protect the kingdom provided they would have to maintain a group of British troops and a British resident at their cost. And then the British would protect them from being attacked by any other rulers, or they would solve their internal crisis. So by accepting the terms of the subsidiary alliance, so many Indian states signed the terms of the subsidiary alliance, but in course of time they realized that it was a great mistake of them, because the British did not allow them to talk to other rulers, even their native states and neighbors. And as a result of it, they had to lose their independence. They had no right to talk to other one. They had no right to make any alliance with other one under the terms of the subsidiary alliance, and hence the British grew, the Indian people and their rulers grew offended. Meanwhile, the outright wars was introduced by Lord Hastings, but once again the British realized that it was too much costly for them, because they are spending money, because there was none to challenge the superiority of the British. Simply they are wasting their money, spending their money. Then they sent Lord Dalhousie as the new Governor General of India. Lord Dalhousie introduced a policy of doctrine of lapse. Under the terms of the doctrine of lapse, the Indian rulers would have no right to adopt any son to the throne after to the throne. The British would not allow, if any Indian state would not have any male child, any heir to the throne, they would not have any right to adopt any male child or any son to the throne of their kingdom. In that case, their kingdoms would automatically come under the British control. And ultimately, the native states, so many Indian states came under the control of the British under the terms of the doctrine of lapse, because Lord Wellesley applied his policy of Lord Dalhousie applied his doctrine of lapse for the annexation of the Indian states. So the doctrine of lapse implied that on the failure of natural heirs to the sovereignty of dependent states should be vested on the British government. Ultimately it came under, so many Indian states came under the British control one by one, but some of the states, they challenged the authority of the British. As a result of it, there were so many wars between the British and the Indian rulers. Ultimately, the British captured, the British annexed the territories of Indian states. Now, the states which were annexed by the British, number one by one, were the Satara, which were brought to the control of the British rule, were Satara. The states which were brought under the control of the British rule were Satara in the year 1848, and next Jaipur and Sambalpur in the year 1849, and afterwards Udaipur, Nagpur, Jhansi. So these were the Indian states came under, one by one, under the control of the British under the terms of the doctrine of lapse. So the doctrine of lapse, therefore, this policy also was criticized by the British, by the Indian rulers and some of the Indian states who control under who the British controlled them. The British, forcefully captured the territories, and ultimately the British East India Company, regarding their policy of subsidiary alliance and doctrine of lapse, they were able to expand their territories in India. So this is the term, Lord Wellesley and the subsidiary alliance of, Lord Dalhousie, doctrine of lapse of Lord Dalhousie gave a bad impact, just left bad impact on the Indian people and their rulers, and hence the British realized it, and ultimately they just they changed some policies. Just it was nothing but a strategy of the British in order to satisfy the Indian people and their rulers. They changed certain policies, but in the meantime they already had annexed almost all the territories of India. Simply they for the satisfaction of Indian people, they brought certain changes they brought some additional alteration in the system of administration. But ultimately, their purpose was served. The British purpose was served because of Lord Hastings' policy of paramountcy, because of Lord Dalhousie's doctrine of Lord Dalhousie's subsidiary alliance, because of Lord Wellesley's doctrine of lapse. Because of Lord Dalhousie's doctrine of lapse. So Lord Wellesley's subsidiary alliance, Lord Hastings' policy of paramountcy, and Lord Dalhousie's policy of doctrine of lapse gave them a great chance to extend British territories in India. And those Indian rulers who challenged the British authorities, they were Hyder Ali and his son Tipu Sultan, and Rani of Jhansi, Lakshmi Bai, challenged the authority of the British, fought but ultimately was died in the battlefield. And Nana Sahib of Kanpur challenged the authority of the British, fought but escaped, but there was none to find him out. And Tatia Topi, the assistant of Nana Sahib, was captured, was arrested, and later on he was executed. So Lord Dalhousie, was a ruler who later on decided to bring certain wrong allegations against the people of India, against the rulers of India. What was about it? He brought allegations against the Indian rulers that they were unable to rule their state properly. So by bringing the allegation of misgovernance, Lord Dalhousie annexed so many Indian states. The last state which was annexed by Lord Dalhousie, what was it? Ayodhya. Because the Nawab of Ayodhya was a very simple, very peaceful man. Earlier, he came to he signed the terms of the subsidiary alliance of Lord Wellesley, and agreed to allow one British resident in his court at his own cost, and also allowed to maintain a group of British troops in his court at his own cost, and but also agreed not to sign any treaty, any alliance with other powers of India. Even he also agreed not to talk to other powers, not to sign any alliance, and not to discuss any issues of his state with any other power of India except the British. But still, the British Lord Dalhousie brought false allegations against his name that he was unable to govern his state properly. So, by bringing the allegation of misgovernance, the bringing the grounds of maladministration, Lord Dalhousie annexed Iod because Iod was full of natural resources and there was huge income from different sources. That's why the British was from the very beginning very much greedy of Iod, and ultimately it was annexed. But the policy of the British, the the policy of the British resulted in the wrong policies of the British, the expansionist policies of the British ultimately resulted in the revolt of 1857. The revolt of 1857 occurred due to the wrong policies of British East India Company. In the year 1857, the revolt of 1857 took place because of the wrong policies of the British East India Company, and the policy of expansion resulted in the revolt of 1857, the first war of independence, which was taken place in the year 1857. And by the middle of 19th century, the British East India Company had conquered most of India, and by means of their wrong policies, and ultimately they became very much powerful political power in India. And by defeating almost all the Indian states, they proved that their political supremacy, no one would be able to question against their political supremacy. They were superior to others, and all other Indian rulers were inferior to them. Ultimately, by way of it, the British established a large territory in India and brought it under their control. And the annexation of Ayodhya was the last one. The British, the British brought it under their control, and ultimately the British, the British became powerful and political entity in India up to this, my dear students. Thank you.